Good morning. Today we are not holding our usual President's Convocation because convocation means calling together, and the coronavirus has once again prevented us from calling our community together as we would like. So I will simply offer brief remarks this morning as our academic year 2021-22 gets underway. I've entitled these thoughts, "The Sense of a Beginning." This is in reference to a renowned work of literary criticism by the British scholar Frank Kermode called The Sense of an Ending. Kermode's thesis is that we human beings, in order to make sense of our lives, construct the perception of a beginning and an end to the cosmos, to the stories we tell, to our own lives. Now, we have no direct experience of either the beginning or the end, so our self-perception is always that we are somewhere in the middle of the story, a truth captured in the opening line of Dante's Divine Comedy, nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, in the middle of the pathway of our life. If Kermode is right, we always find ourselves in the middle, yet are always drawn to explore and seek to understand beginnings and ends. A poet much closer to our own time, T.S. Eliot, opens the second of his 4 quartets, the one called East Coker, with the line, "In my beginning is my end." And he concludes this deliberately and continually paradoxical work with the words, "In my end is my beginning." It's clear enough what the first phrase suggests. From the very beginning of our lives, it is an inescapable aspect of the human condition that there will be an end. In some sense, life itself engenders the inevitability of death. But what does it mean to say, "In my end is my beginning"? Eliot clearly flirts with Eastern thought in the 4 quartets, but I don't think this is necessarily a direct allusion to reincarnation. We might think instead of the ancient mythic symbol known as the Ouroboros, the snake that bites its own tail, which has signified in many cultures nature's eternal cycle of death and rebirth, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Eliot invites us to rethink and perhaps elide the distinction between beginnings and ends. I draw 2 more lines from Eliot's poem, deliberately taken out of context, but eerily expressive of our current moment, and they are these. What was to be the value of the long looked forward to, long hoped for calm, the autumnal serenity? We had indeed looked forward to this autumn, its promise of calm, as we thought the vaccination rates of our campus population would buffer us against infection. That has not proven to be true. As we all know, our case numbers are relatively high, and the majority of those cases to date are among those who are vaccinated. But, and this is extremely important, positive cases among the vaccinated are not leading to serious illness. In fact, one challenge is that symptoms may be so mild, students simply think they're the result of allergies or cold, and are not recognizing or notifying health services that they may be COVID positive. So we had hoped that this moment would be an end to the fatigue, the fear, the constantly shifting uncertainties of COVID. But it is not an end. Instead, it appears at the beginning of this academic year to be a beginning. I believe this may be the beginning of a new way of existing with this dis-ease, as we do with many others, as just a feature of our world now. If that is the case, then this is an appropriate time not to mourn that hoped-for end, but to renew our traditional practice of celebrating the beginning of a new year and new possibilities. And there is much to celebrate. A robust and diverse incoming class, a cohort of impressive new faculty members joining us, a number of new curricular offerings, but just as important as thinking about renewal at the institutional level is thinking about the possibility of renewal that every academic year offers each of us. For students, I urge you to consider every new semester, including this one, as an opportunity, to some extent, to reinvent yourself. Could you become a person who speaks Japanese? Could you become a person who develops an entrepreneurial idea? Could you hone your graphic design skills? Publish a short story, a novel? Could you co-author a scientific study? Will you lead your team to a national championship in NCAA sports, in esports, in robotic design? All of these, and many more, are possibilities that open with the opening of a new year. For faculty members, this new year offers opportunities to encounter lively young minds, eager to learn. Students come to Illinois Wesleyan because they know that you truly care about teaching and mentoring them. Your influence on these students' lives is both enormous and incalculable. None of us can know exactly what effect we will have on a student's future and choices, but we know that it matters enormously. I know that I'm not alone in having the experience many times of an alumnus or alumna contacting me years after their graduation to tell me how much a particular class meant to them. The extraordinary thing is that most of the time, I had no idea the effect that class was having. We don't fully know the beginnings we set in motion. For staff members, I know the last few years have not been easy. You have often borne a large burden as we've dealt with financial constraints and with the pandemic. Please know that I understand how much the university depends on you. From maintaining facilities to ensuring that offices function smoothly, you keep us going. And in some cases, you've done that through generations of a family. That is an unmatched commitment, and I want to name it and honor it. Today, we are not at the end of the difficult time we've experienced over the last 18 months, but we are inevitably at the beginning of new possibilities for coping with the reality in which we find ourselves, certainly, but also new possibilities for learning, for growing, for building and rebuilding and renewing this community. I suggest that we've even learned a good deal from our experiences with the pandemic. On the one hand, COVID-19 made clear how globally interconnected we are. But on the other hand, the pandemic revealed ways in which we are quite disconnected from one another. While the world was united theoretically in potential vulnerability to the novel coronavirus, in fact, pre-existing conditions, not only medical, but economic and sociocultural, meant that some were much more vulnerable than others. For many of us in colleges and universities, students, faculty, staff, and administrators, the pandemic revealed fissures and pathologies in social structures and practices, as well as omissions or erasures in our institutional histories that may not have been so evident before and that we need to address. I hope we have also learned that some of the divisions we see in university life are not productive for the future. In today's universities, humanities, sciences, and professional studies often seem to vie for primacy. But the world's wicked problems do not sort themselves along these divisions. They are inherently interdisciplinary. Our experience during the pandemic offers an opportunity to recognize how greatly we benefit from and need multiple modes of understanding. Science clearly came to the fore. The breakneck speed of vaccine development, admittedly building on 15 years of previous research, was truly impressive. Project Warp Speed had succeeded phenomenally in development, but it did not succeed in distribution. And that distribution depended not only on scientific discovery and supply chains, but on social, cultural, and psychological factors such as trust. Our science was amazing, but other modes of thought are critical. The pandemic has reinforced this truth. As we isolated in our homes, many of us turned to the arts and humanities as means of connecting to the human experience. Reading and book sales soared. We realized how many works of literature are actually narratives of plague, from the Iliad to the recent bestseller Hamnet. Conversations quickly turned to what Netflix series your household was streaming. In short, we recognize that we truly need what philosopher Martha Nussbaum has called the narrative imagination to connect us to others, whether next door or across miles or centuries. We need narrative to enter into empathic understanding of others' lives, to provide, as Kermode argued, that sense of a beginning, a middle, and an end that enables us to make sense of our own lives. In that continuing project of sense-making, I suggest that an academic community like ours is virtually unique in offering us an annual opportunity to start afresh, to set our sights on new goals and aspirations, to add very intentionally to the repertoire of experiences we may have and thoughts we may entertain, to determine the ends we want to accomplish. So today, let's begin.